guys have decent COVID beards, so
Yeah.
it's good. Sign of the times. Even the big stars
Okay,
are
that's
looking
my
like
favorite.
all casual nowadays. It seems to be the look nowadays. So
Yeah. The COVID look is in right now.
all right, welcome to the radio podcast. Edwin Chand, how are you?
Good. Doing
Mr.
well.
Sali, how are you?
Pretty good considering the circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, we always have to. We always have to do that, right? Considering the circumstances, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
So, Edwin, let's start by you introducing yourself. You graduated from Delview Secondary.
Yes.
What
in
year?
2008, so a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Well,
I think
we
you
were
were.
the second graduating class, I think. So the first one was 1 year before us, and we were the second graduating class of like the full secondary school.
Right, that's when we went to 8 to 12 for the first time.
Yeah.
And you were in my grade 8 class for PE when I taught
Yes.
PE.
And that's where you advertised your information technology to the
Was it?
kids. Yes. I remember like it was an end of PE class. You're like, hey guys, I'm going to be teaching infotech next year. You guys should totally sign up for it. Because we had like one elective for grade 9 to take or something, or like a few electives to take for grade 9. And that was one of them.
I totally didn't remember that, but I guess you do.
Yeah, I remember.
Selling the course.
I just remember trying to get through teaching PE for the first time. Or actually, that was my second time because I taught at Delta Secondary as well. But you were in my first grade 8 class at Delview.
Yep.
And I think I was teaching like 2 grade 8 PE classes or something like that. And then the rest was all math. No, I had like math. I had like 7 different preps. I had like drama, math, computer studies is what they used to call infotech.
Yeah.
And then so you guys, you and a really small group of students became the first infotech. I think it was infotech 9, right?
Yeah.
So it was the next
9.
year. Yeah. So, and I remember being in that really large room with a divider. I think it was your room, Ryan.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's where infotech was in your room, the adjoining the 2 sides.
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be computers in there.
Did they have? I was going to say they have a little computer lab in there.
Yeah. So I used to have that whole space to myself, which was cool.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
So Ed, when you were in the first infotech class, I think there were about, if I remember correctly, like only like 17 of you or something like that, 16, 17.
Yeah. There weren't many of us. I think it was all the people you could get from the PE class, because I don't think it was like.
I didn't do a good enough job, obviously.
Well, no, but like no one really read like the course selection booklet. I think people kind of just chose like some of the woodworks, the electronics, and so on. So like no one really looked at it. So and infotech was a new offering that year. So I think it was just like word of mouth, like who you can tell.
Right. And what do you remember learning in that class? Because I think we did web design, right?
Yeah, I think we started off with web design. Yeah, that's kind of like that was the crux of it. I think it was like HTML, CSS, mainly HTML though. I think just like learning the syntax, creating like those kind of like old web pages that were very static, nothing dynamic.
You know why? Because I think that's all I knew at that point. I think I was probably learning CSS as I was teaching that. So
yeah,
being self-taught.
No, it was I mean, like for all of it was a pretty fun class. I liked working with that. As difficult as working with HTML can be. I mean, it's not a hard thing. It's just all the browser incompatibilities. I just remember that being the only pain point really, because Internet Explorer still existed then. So.
Yeah, and I think However, even though it's really simple, I think a lot of even now when I teach it in grade 8, a lot of people when they make their first web page, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do this, right? Because
Yeah.
some of them are used to dragging and dropping stuff using various tools, and some of them had never even figured out how a web page worked. So it's always neat when you see, oh, I'm typing this out and then it's showing up on a web page, right? And to
Yeah.
publish it, it's like, wow, it's on the
I
internet.
think I think that's like from what I remember in the class, that was like one of the highlights. Like seeing something start to finish, and then seeing it somewhere where like I can access it from home, I can access it from school, and I made that like from scratch. That was like I think progression is always nice, and I think you when you see you have accomplished something at the end of it, it's like, oh, that's great. I had no idea that this is how things work, so and you just want to dig in more into it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I like to think of all projects nowadays. Like we got to see it to the end. There's some sort of end product that's public, right? So because
Right.
I find that super empowering. Like even for myself, when I put something out there, right? It's like, yeah, it's on YouTube, right? I didn't just
Yeah.
make this and it just stays on my computer. It's out there.
Yeah. I think it's the I think it's the give. It's something you can give, and you feel accomplished at the end of it because you've done work on it, and like generally like you'll hear artists say this a lot. Like people who make music or content. It's like I would be making this stuff even if like no one watched it, or even if like 2 or 3 people watched it, right? So it's the same thing with like a web page. Even if no one really visits your web page other than you, it's like something you did, and you feel like, oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. I think it's part of it is just loving to learn as well, because once
Yeah.
you've accomplished it, you've kind of leveled up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can do this now. I can do the next thing, and then next thing, next thing, next thing. So it's really empowering for yourself, even if nobody sees it. It's part of the steps to learning something even bigger.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
So
Definitely.
so you also took some other infotech courses later on, as I
Yeah.
remember.
I think I took infotech till my yeah. I think I took infotech every year, if I remember correctly. After
Yeah,
that point, I liked it a lot, so
yeah,
I just kept taking it till I graduated.
right.
Um,
And then after you graduated, what did you end up doing?
yeah. So after I graduated, I went to Simon Fraser, and one of the things that I always I think it kind of like started happening kind of in high school where I was like, oh, you know what, like it's nice like dabbling in software. I was like, I really want to build something. Like I wanted to make something with my hands, and I thought, okay, well, and I think I took electronics and like woodwork and other shop classes, and I always was like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I can make like a blend of all of these things. So when I was thinking about that, and like when we were thinking about our planning our careers, I was like, oh, engineering seems to suit like the interests that I have. So I think my choice was between like, do I go into computer science or do I go into computer engineering or electrical computer engineering? I always felt that I think I gelled more with electrical and computer engineering because I could get the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to SFU, did engineering for 5 years, and that was a really great experience because um, we got to do a lot of cool things. We took part in some autonomous robotics competitions against other schools in
Was
Canada.
that was
We
that
went to
before or after they created the Mechatronics program?
that. This was I started kind of when Mechatronics was kind of just starting at
Okay.
SFU at least. So it was still a program that year, but it was kind of in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a bunch of things. We did a ton of like collaboration projects with the Mechatronics engineering program in Surrey. And that was really great. So like I think we had like a Formula One car initiative at one point we were helping with. It's just like a bunch of schools build like an F1 like racer. It's not like a fully fledged thing, but you kind of make it like design your own engine, and there's a lot that
Oh
went
wow.
behind it. And we took part in like a few autonomous vehicle competitions. I think one of the things I really liked about SFU, which I and that's kind of why I chose to go there. It was kind of like similar to Delview in that sense. Like at least when I went to Delview, because my graduating class was like 60 people, so it was a small school. You had like more, you had the ability to do more because you had like more time, one with the teachers, plus you had like more kind of like, you could make a bigger impact just because, you know, like everyone kind of counted on you a little bit more.
Right.
So like
You're
I
big
think it was
fish in a small pond, as they say.
right. So it was I think that was one of the factors that came into my decision. And also like I was like, well, you know, I don't really want to leave my mom's home cooked meals because that's
Who wants to
that's
leave
pretty
that?
good. Yeah. So the choice was like UBC, SFE. If I went to UBC, I couldn't stay home because I lived in Delta. That's like a 2-hour commute, even with transit. So like I'd be, you know, living on campus. So it was always like, oh, you know, this lets me get my home cooked meals. It's a small school, so I'll get like, I'll be able to like be a bigger part of various things, and really that's thankfully that's exactly how it worked. You know, sometimes you have this decision making process and you go into it and it doesn't always work out. In my case, I was fortunate enough where like I got a lot of opportunities to take part in a lot of things. Start a few clubs. I think we started a robotics club, like an autonomous aircraft club, because these things that didn't exist in SFU prior, so we had like a lot of freedom in what we could do. So you know, we got all the cheddar in terms of like all the money that engineering got, we could put into these clubs. So
Cool.
it was, I think that was a great experience, and I think after that, I did a few internships at Blackberry, and then I did one at Apple, and then I stuck to it at Apple after that.
So you got the Waterloo internship at Blackberry.
Yeah,
That was you did 2 there?
I did 2 there, so over 2 separate months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And then
what was that like? What was the culture at Blackberry at that time? Because that was after the iPhone.
that was after the iPhone. So you know, like I have the kind of unfortunate news to share about the time that I was working there. Like I think when I started working there, BlackBerry was still kind of doing well. iPhones had launched, but it wasn't like everyone's using it, but like for enterprise, BlackBerry and Research in Motion at the time, you know, that was your de facto.
Mm-hmm.
What I noticed when I was working there, culture was good. It was great working there actually. Like I think I had a good time. I learned a ton. They were also working on like bleeding edge stuff. So there were a lot of cool projects I worked on there. But I think the problem came, I think, was with the vision. I think BlackBerry was in the mindset that, you know, the future lies still in the physical keyboard, because they didn't quite believe that a touch experience would be able to do the same things a keyboard could. And I think that was kind of their downfall a little bit, because one of the things that I felt was they did too late, and you know, like this is of course an opinion, was they got into touch a little bit too late in the game. Eventually they found out that that's what everyone's going towards, that that's what everyone wants. And I honestly feel bad, because I think like BlackBerry had a great product. They had in a lot of ways, they also cared about kind of the same principles Apple does. They were always privacy centric. They had top-notch security. So they were a great company, and you know, they still have that side of the business, the enterprise side of the business. But you know, they've kind of sold out the hardware.
Well, it's kind of hard to blame them, because a lot of the corporate world really desired a physical keyboard, right? Because so many people were used to texting and things like that with a physical keyboard. And I have to say, I've never had a BlackBerry, so I can't really, I can't tell you the difference. But a lot of people I talked to back then said, yeah, I can't do without a physical keyboard.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it was maybe a multitude of factors. You know, they were so into enterprise, and enterprise apps at that time weren't ready for touch. So it's like, do we leave enterprise and go into the consumer market? But what ended up happening was the consumer market ended up invading the enterprise market. So people were like using iPhones, and then when it came time to select work phones, the whole bring your own device thing started coming into play. And once people started bringing their own device, and once like other companies started doing like enterprise solutions, then the market changed, and BlackBerry didn't have nearly enough time to adjust. So it's unfortunate. It was a great company to work for. I only have really positive experiences from BlackBerry.
Does it not exist at all anymore?
It still does, but they've basically just become a software solution company now. So they just
Oh, okay.
do enterprise at this point. I think their hardware division sold
I
off.
recall seeing like a couple years ago, it was kind of like I thought they were trying to make a comeback with like a business kind of phone, but that I guess didn't pan out. Or
I think they dabbled in using Android as their operating system, and then like seeing if people would kind of jump onto Blackberry still. But I think the people had moved on at that point. So I think it wasn't necessarily. I would say like I think their last phone was actually pretty decent, but I think it just with so many other phones in the market, it was, I think, too little, too late, unfortunately.
Yeah, because when did Samsung start taking off too? That would have been around the same time, right?
Yeah, so I think the Samsung was like around the S3 or something like that. That's when like they really started kicking it, into overdrive. And I think that's the problem that BlackBerry has, and actually a lot of companies have right now, because there's so many phones on the market these days. It's a difficult market to compete in.
Well, it's hard to come in late in that world, right? If you come in late, you better have something top notch that's better than the last thing, or an alternative. In which, in the case of the Android phones, such as Samsung, it was a cheaper alternative to what Apple produced, right? And so, unless that happens, if you're late to the game, forget about it. Just like Microsoft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, for Blackberry, you did 2 different internships, and in both of them, what were you doing exactly?
So I work mainly on the GPU team at Blackberry. So one of the things that we were tasked to do are essentially like animations and various effects like blends and so on. There are various hardware, software functions that can do them, and then there's certain optimal tasks. So I think one of the parts of our jobs was to figure out which algorithms work best for which use cases, and be able to kind of dynamically switch at runtime based on the job at hand. So
was that for their
animations, and it was for their phones.
For the phones, okay.
Yeah.
I was just thinking because they also have QNX, which is for infotainment systems in cars and things like that, right?
Right. So I think what they did with QNX was, they brought it in afterwards, because they had bought them, and then that's QNX formed like the groundwork for BlackBerry 10 or whatever they called their touch operating system afterwards. They had different operating systems all developed in house before that point. So QNX was the BB10 of BB10.
So I guess they had a few things going on just in case, and they were trying to see which stuck. But unfortunately, when you do that, you tend to come in late.
Yeah, I think they were trying. They were trying.
Yeah. It's really hard to fault them. It's a tough business to be in. Yeah,
it is.
So how did you end up getting getting the Apple internship?
So I came back from my 2 internships, and I was a third year at that point, and so I did a year of school, and then like right before, like it was actually kind of like a spontaneous visit. I'd say Apple had some people in town, and I guess like someone knew one of my professors, and they said, "Hey, do you have any students you would recommend that we can interview?" So my professor like sent like a group of students that he would recommend. Hey, send me your resumes, and I'll forward it to so and so person. So we didn't really think much of it. We're like, okay, sure, why not? So we just sent him the resumes, and then they had some people come on campus, and then we just did a really informal interview, and that's kind of how it started. So it's like through word of mouth, someone recommended, and then we did an interview process, and they're like, hey, want to come and work for us? So I was like, oh, sure, why not?
Cool. I've heard that kind of story before, because I had a friend who got recommended as well by a professor, and it was just, it's some people call it luck, but it's really, being ready for that moment when that happens. Like obviously you had to be good to be recommended by your professor, right? So you had to be good first of all, and then when that time came around, then it happened. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the other side of it, right? Like, I think it's getting your foot through the door, which helps, because like if you look at everyone who graduates engineering from anywhere, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who are good. There's a lot of people who might not actually have a reference just because they weren't involved, or whatever the reasons happens to be they don't have reference. Doesn't necessarily make them like bad engineers or anything like that. It just sometimes certain things help. It's definitely like if you have it, if you do well and you're in your people see that in your performance, people are going to remember you. And so when it comes time to be like, hey, who would you recommend? It's like, yeah, that person. You remember the people who have potential, I guess. So that's kind of it sometimes it doesn't work for some people just because they may have like a lot of potential, but they may not be like as involved with certain projects or whatever it may be. So I think that's actually, if I had to give an advice, since it's overloaded, is like you want to make sure that the work you're doing, that people know that you're doing that work, because like sometimes people are very quiet and reserved, and I think that's great. That we can all be like that at times, but it's like you need to know that you need to make sure your voice gets heard, because your opinion does matter, and I think in engineering that's more important than anything else, because otherwise people will design around you, and you have to do whatever they design. So you want to be a part of that conversation.
I think that's huge advice, because a lot of, like, as teachers, we do references, and we have students come back to us after graduating, or even in their grade 12 year, asking for letters of reference and things like that. And we do think back to all those moments that we've worked with them, and what's this person's character, and how hard do they work, what have they produced, what have they done, or do they really have an interest in what they're doing.
Right.
So all of that comes into play, and I think it's really good advice for people who are listening, who are students, that it's not just about marks, that it's also about showing what you can do while you're in in various situations that you're put in.
Yeah, no, it's important, and I think actually I'll make a comment on the marks related thing. That's another thing that, like, I think a lot of people get sometimes, like, I've seen this in college, that like people weren't doing so well, and they felt like, so for SFU, co-op was a requirement, and maintaining a certain level of GPA is kind of like the school requirement. Co-op itself didn't really have a requirement, but they were supposed to send your grades if requested by the employer. And I will say this, so grades matter to some extent, but at the same time, when someone's looking through resumes and so on, they always look at, like, okay, what is this person able to do? What is this person capable of? What has this person done? Like, you really look at the skills and not really the number, because the number is a very, like, rough estimate of, like, your ability to know the material. Like I when I was at Blackberry, I interviewed people who were 4.0 GPAs who didn't pass the interview, whereas someone with like a like a 2.9 or like a 2.8 or something lower, they rocked the interview and they got hired. So the fact of the matter is, some people may care, but as an industry, most people tend to want to understand, like, okay, can you do the job? Are you smart? Can you learn? Because learning's ongoing, and whatever you learn in school doesn't mean that's exactly what you can do at your job. We really want to know how you think. That's
And I think even different environments, because I had a lot of friends in high school who, throughout high school, they were kind of C students, right? And then once they got into post-secondary, they really took off. And it's a different environment, different challenges. So that can change you.
Yeah. I would just say, don't let, like, your grades discourage you or define you. It just means that, if you're not doing so well, there's room to improve. That's really all it is, like it's just an indicator of like, oh, maybe I need to work more on something, and maybe that's not where your heart is anyways, so.
So the Apple internship, what was that like?
Mm-hmm.
So was that in
Yeah.
Cupertino? You went to Cupertino for that?
Yeah, I went to Cupertino. Actually, that was a lot of fun. I think Apple always makes it kind of like an experience, I guess, like for interns. So I actually stayed with so our accommodation was, of course, like arranged by Apple, but we stayed with like 4 other people who were also interns from different schools, like different places in the world. So I think like my first 4 roommates, there was like someone from like Eastern US, someone from China, and then someone from France. And we were all kind of like roomed together. And it's really cool because I think like you got to know these people, and they're all from all over the place. So they all come with different experiences. They're all like different. Everyone has like a different quirk, So like it was quite fun being able to talk to them, and kind of learn from where they come from, what they want to do. It's very inspiring too, because you kind of see these other people who seem to be like doing really well, and then you kind of feed off that energy.
And what did you do in that year that you were an intern there?
So that year, I worked on some things related to cellular towers. I was on the baseband team. I think the exact logistics I can't discuss, unfortunately. It's
We've had a few of these conversations where talking to Edwin, what are you working on? I can't discuss that. It's so man of mystery.
Yeah,
you signed all the NDAs.
I'm hidden behind NDAs.
So even your intern, well, I guess they might still be working on whatever you're working on. Or again, there may be some.
it's something I can't say anything about. I get this is like, I can generically answer you like things I did. Like I worked on a technology. It was like a cellular technology. What I do now, I work on sensors, various sensors. That's the most they'll probably get out of me.
Cool. You're like some sort of secret agent.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could feel like that.
So right after the internship, you landed a job at Apple?
Yeah. So after the internship, I was actually double-minded at that time because I at that point I had applied to Tesla and I had that offer. So I was thinking, should I go work there or should I work at Apple? And
you got an offer at Tesla?
Yeah. So because it was coming to the end of my internship, so I decided to like apply to a few places in the Bay, see like what else is out there, and the only place I really cared to work for other than Apple at that time was actually Tesla. So I considered it. And then my other option was I wanted to go back home too, because I like Vancouver, so I still do. So I'd applied actually to a bunch of places locally too, and I was in the middle of deciding between offers, and my manager he gave me the offer and he's like, okay, think about it, right? I was like, all right, okay, let me figure it out, right? The next morning he calls me and he's like, hey, Edwin, are you free today? He gave me the offer on Friday. I was leaving the next week, sometime Wednesday or Thursday. And he's like, hey, are you free today? So he's like, yeah. Let's go for a drive. So we went out for a drive, and basically, I think
in
the
a
drive
Tesla
and so on. No. I mean, he had like a pretty modest Acura. But because he was giving me his sales pitch basically. It's like, hey, you should come work for us. We're gonna do all sorts of cool things. So it was he was showing
what sorts of cool things.
I see you wanna stick to that one.
I'm trying to act like a journalist,
Yeah. And I'm gonna be like everyone else and be like, oh, I can't say. You'll know when you know, right? So
yeah.
And yeah, so he showed me around the area. He took me to the beach. He's like, look at this place. Don't you want to be in this place? And it is beautiful. Bay Area is nice. So he gave me his pitch, and I think like after thinking about it, I was definitely heavily biased towards Apple at that point. So
Cool.
I took that offer.
So
yeah, so it was
like Elon didn't pull up in his whatever they were working on, say, Edwin, don't you want to join us?
No, so I think the way Tesla is like a place where it's like a passion project place. Like they don't actually try very hard to get you. They're like, well, we have a whole bunch of other people who want to come and work for us.
Right.
So for them, it's like, okay, you don't want to work for us. That's good for you.
They're not going to try extra hard to grab you.
Yeah, I mean that's how they've always been, and they're also a startup. So I think for them, they're a really big startup at this point, but for them, it's like if you don't really feel like you want to work here, because I think the other thing for them is like at that time competitively they weren't able to really match the salary in the industry, and the Bay Area is a really expensive place to live. So for a lot of people that does come into play, because like the Bay is quite expensive to live in. So that definitely factors into the decision making for a lot of people. But if you're working here for a couple of years, sometimes people like jump ship and then go and work at Tesla. I've seen that happen throughout like various people from Google go and work at Tesla, Facebook. There's a lot actually. There's a lot of moving around here. People move around jobs relatively frequently, I guess.
You're still in Michigan, right?
Yeah, still in Michigan.
Okay, so yeah. Ryan, just to let you know, Edwin went to Boston, which was the last time or the time before that I talked to him, and then the next time I saw him, he was in Michigan because his wife's there. And I guess you're going to stay there for the time being because you can work remotely until they call you back.
Yeah, or until I want to go back to California again.
Right.
So, but yeah, so at least indefinitely. Although I think my wife's rotation ends at the end of this month, so we'll both go back.
Where did you meet your wife?
Actually, I met her in San Jose through a friend. Actually, the friend was one of the roommates I had during my Apple internship.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I met her. It was actually the girl who he was dating. It was her friend. So he wanted her to meet me, not my wife, but like his new girlfriend to meet me, and then me to meet her, and then True to meet Michael. Michael's the friend, right? So, and yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Cool. So she's Californian.
Yeah, she's from San Jose.
Neat. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Bay Area. Northern California.
Yeah, Northern California is very, very different from the South. I think it's more happening, in my opinion. Also, it's like the weather is better.
In Northern California?
Yeah, because you get weather.
I'm thinking San Diego, like 30 degrees all year round.
Yeah, I mean, San Diego gets cold, but they don't get as much rain. LA, for example, like very little rain. So at least in San Jose and the Bay Area, you kind of have some variation. Because like, contrary to popular belief, sun every day, it's raining.
It's draining.
Like you get to a point where like, okay, I'm done. Can it please rain? So
well, we complain about rain all the time here, and today is kind of nice that it's a little bit overcast because we had a few days of really hot weather. So
right,
it's nice to have it cool down once in a while. But San Francisco gets super cold. Yeah,
San Francisco is very cold. I think actually that catches a lot of people by surprise. When my dad landed here, he didn't bring a jacket, so he had come to visit.
Yeah.
And the first thing he did, like when we got out of the airport, was like, "It's cold here." He's like, "Isn't this supposed to be like summer?" I was like, "Yeah, but it's San Francisco. There's overcast all the time. It's close to the water. It gets pretty cold."
Yeah, you get blast from the Pacific.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
and that's why the redwoods are so tall, because they get a lot of water.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the other thing, like it always shocks people. I think like every single person who's come to visit me here, every single person has like, this is not what I imagined California to be. I was like, you're all thinking of Southern California. So when you get those like nice California ads, or like you've seen those shows where they show California, it's rarely the Bay Area, I mean, unless it's Silicon Valley, and then it's the Bay Area.
Yeah. So you live in Cupertino, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty close to Apple Park.
Yeah, biking distance. So it's which is pretty nice. I think that's like it's nice not having to sit through traffic. I'm very happy for that.
So I don't know how much you can reveal, but what is it like? What is it like working at Apple?
Yeah, so I can tell you the whole world about what it's like. I just can't tell you what I'm working on.
Okay.
I mean, it's it's relatively open, like pretty nice environment to work in. Like like there's, I think one of the things that I found when I came here was like, oh my God, there's so many people who've come from so many places. And that was really cool, because like just in my internship time, I met people from like at least 3 different countries, just who were just living with me. That's not including people I met at work. And then at work we also had like people from all over, like and it's very interesting, because I think that's kind of goes to show, like, I think diversity of thought, and kind of the melting pot of like ideas, because everyone comes from different experiences, different backgrounds, and that really does help, like, and what my opinion is that it really helps with like work atmosphere, and also like with innovation in general, because everyone brings something different to the mix. So it's really cool to kind of be in that environment, like, so I think that was like the biggest thing, because when I worked at Blackberry, I think they hired a lot, but they hired a lot of
similar people.
A lot of similar people, because like they generally hired from Canada. So like like immigration to US and immigration to Canada are like immigration to Canada is a lot harder for a lot of people. So generally, when companies in Canada hire, they tend to hire mostly local. And if you hire local, you're probably going to get a relatively diverse set, but just the local set. So, and that can be, and I think that's why like it was very different working at BlackBerry and as compared to like working at Apple, because it's I think like the whole atmosphere just feels different. It's not as homogenous. At least that's how I felt when I first started working here. And I think that's honestly like probably the biggest, I won't say surprise, but the biggest like positive about the workplace. I think the other thing is like everyone's very like, it's generally pretty easy to work with most people. Like there's always exceptions to that rule. It's been fun. Like your ideas are encouraged. As crazy as they may be sometimes.
So in terms of, I really believe in having multiple different types of people together, because that's how you come up with interesting ideas that are outside the scope of what you normally get if you have the same types of people. Even people from different educational backgrounds would help as well. A lot of companies believe in that. But in terms of what you do at Apple, how do, like, somebody in your group has a really good idea for something, how does that get out of that group and then become something? Like, how is that encouraged at your company? Or is it more top down?
It's really a mix of both. Like I think ideas come
I know
from
this guy. What do you think of when you see Steve Jobs? I'm holding up a book here, Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Have you read this, Edwin?
No, I haven't.
It's a really good book. because he was an interesting character. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of his personality was encouraging people to be creative, but he always had a vision of how things should work, right?
Yeah. I think in general, like, there's always an overarching vision of like what needs to be done. But I guess like maybe a better way to explain it is like it's more about so ideas I think are encouraged at both levels, top down, bottom up. Um, of course, like like if they don't fit inside something, of course they're not going to be priority, right? So there is like veto power from top, right? Like, but otherwise, in general, it is open both ways. But I think what's more, I guess, what's encouraged more in general, like what I found at least with my work experience is that there is generally like a lot of attention to detail. If you know, like if you kind of know Steve Jobs, if you read like these types of biographical things about him, he was always about that attention to detail, and that
Mhm.
kind of sometimes forms a work culture. I think till
It's
today it generally
like an
exists.
obsessive attention to detail.
Right, but that kind of sets the bar to like what the
Yeah.
culture will be and what the expectations will be, and I think that part has been kind of like consistent in my opinion.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. And it's
it's
just a
been
contrast from the outside. Like when I look at Google from the outside again, it seems like they're more about like everybody has their own little projects going on, and some things stick, some things don't. Some things stick for a while and then they cancel it, or they'll buy a startup company and they'll use it for a little bit, and then sometimes it goes away. So it seems a little bit more. We're going to keep this startup culture going, and we'll see how. Which is like for the consumer, it seems it's a little bit confusing because there's always name changes and product changes, and the thing that you love one day is you don't know how long it's going to last because they
yeah.
all of a sudden abandon the project. Um, Whereas with Apple, it seems a little bit more that everything's in line with certain uh, product goals.
Yeah.
Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, Apple's product oriented. Like one of the things that like is I would say is like like we like building a good ecosystem. It's one of the things that I feel like is kind of ingrained. Um, Kind of building on top of platforms that already exist. So that's I think like generally pretty. It's pretty important for Apple to kind of have focus. Just because at any point in time you can be working on a ton of things, but the message to someone might be confusing, like you said, like with some things that Google may or may not do. So I think it's pretty. I think Apple needs that focus because of the products that it works on. Like because otherwise, if you keep doing multiple things, then well, I guess in some ways, like if you look at BlackBerry, that was thing that we discussed earlier. That was one of their issues. They were focused on too many things. They didn't kind of hone in on like one thing and just do it, because we were working on 3 different projects at like one time when I was at BlackBerry, and it was it was definitely draining on the engineering, but it was also like fragmented because you didn't really know what the team wanted. Like, do they want to focus on this? How much time do I spend on this? So like that does trickle
Mm.
down to the bottom of the company, right? Like
Right.
if the head doesn't have a good vision, then everyone's going to be a little bit like, okay, I don't really know what's important.
Or if you feel like, am I wasting my time with this when I should be working on that, right? That kind of thing. Which is kind of like you feel unproductive that way if you're working on something and you think it's going to be canceled or not going to go anywhere, right?
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things
Yeah.
I like to do on the show is think about how you got here. So you're married, you're in Michigan right now, but I guess you really live in Cupertino, work for
Yeah.
Apple. And what is your title? You're an Apple engineer? Would you call yourself?
Well, it's a systems engineer,
System
embedded
engineer.
systems engineer. Yeah.
Okay. So, even Like were you born in Canada?
No, I was born in Fiji.
You were born in
Uh,
Fiji. And
yeah, yeah.
when did you make your way to Canada and why?
So I was 12 years old when we moved to Canada. Uh, yeah,
So you're old
yeah,
enough to
12 years
remember
old.
and understand everything, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
what
for sure.
and it was quite a switch for you?
Uh, so yeah, that's I think the origin story is somewhat interesting in that sense because so we left because there was a there was a military coup in Fiji, which so like a little bit political here, but like over the years there was a lot of animosity growing between like Indians in Fiji and then the natives in Fiji because uh, because of what the British Empire had done
Mm,
in the country. So one of the things that the natives felt, like it's like our land was taken, given to the Indians, and then now that the British left, they were like, well, we want some of that land back, right? But now that's all farming land. So taking land back means stopping farming. So there was always a conflict of interest that the government didn't want to give the land back, and that created a further divide between the Indians and the natives. And this kind of boiled over in a few conflicts. And I think there were two military coups, one before I was born. Actually, I might not have been born if that if things happened in a different way. Like my mom, I think she was actually chased down the street with like a machete knife when she
wow.
was in the city. And I think it was like the irony of that is like she was Indian, of course, but she was actually saved by like a native taxi driver. He's so like it's like the point is that no one's right and wrong. There's frustrations on both sides, and the government didn't do enough to address it, and it just boiled over into like physical conflict. I think after the second one, my parents were like, well, this is not really a stable place for the kids to grow up. Um, who knows what might happen. Thankfully, like these days, I hear Fiji is doing pretty well. I think they've kind of sorted through some of those problems. But their thinking at that time was, let's try to like go somewhere so that the kids can have a better future. So I think I do remember like we applied to I think Australia, New Zealand, U.S. and Canada. Uh, Four places where we were going to migrate to. I think we decided Canada because a lot of my dad's family was in Canada, so they're like, hey, that might be a good place. America's process was way too long, so we didn't even consider that. Um, the Australia and New Zealand were like basically the other options, which were heavily being considered. I don't really know why we didn't choose that, but I wanted to go to Canada because I had cousins who I really liked. I don't know if it was because of me that they said, hey, we'll go to Canada. But anyways, we moved to Canada, and I was 12 years old. Um, Definitely for me, the transition was really easy. Being young, the transition was much harder for the rest of my family who were like older. My brother actually already had a computer science degree at that point, but when he
Mm,
came to Canada, he he had difficulty in applying for jobs in computer science because they didn't recognize the degree.
right.
So he had a bunch of issues with getting jobs. And the strange part was because the universities knew that he already did computer science, they wouldn't let him redo computer science because they said you've already done it. There was like there was all sorts of things he had problems with, and
That's a
um,
common immigrant story.
yeah, so he ended up like dropping that because he needed to work, to like help out with the family and so on. So and eventually he got back into computer science, but it was like a really long process for him. I think he probably had like the hardest time. And then my sister also, they all struggled. I did really well because I was young and because I was shielded from all of the stuff they had. Like they were dealing with adult problems. I was still a kid,
Right.
so
And you went
I
to
got it easy.
school here, so you got used to
Yeah,
going to school here and learning, what we learn here and the culture and everything. So
yeah.
that
I think
helped.
I got acquainted with the culture, and I think that so it was never a problem with me. For them, they had to like adapt and learn about how things work here, um, and do it fast because they don't have a ton of time. They have to become productive very quickly.
Hmm.
So so yeah, so like I think like so it's I think for me, like that's always been like an inspiration too, like because like looking at my parents and what they did, like they had a good life there. They didn't really have to move. But basically, the only problem in Fiji was like uncertainty on what the military may or may not do in the future, or what may happen. But like in terms of our life, we actually were doing pretty well there. So for them to like leave all of that and then come to Canada just so that like the kids could have a better future was like a big deal, because they didn't have to. They weren't really struggling, but they had to come and then again start the struggle from kind of the offset. Like my dad and my mom both had office jobs back in Fiji, but then when they came here, of course they're not going to get office jobs. So they started at the bottom. They were janitors, or my mom worked at 7-Eleven. My dad worked at various things. So it was I think that was always like the fire in the back of my head, just like like I need to make sure that I make the most of this opportunity. So yeah, that kept me going.
Yeah. So like my parents as well, you do whatever you can to survive when you get here, and then hopefully your children can start from the beginning and become something that's greater, right? So that's always the hope as an immigrant.
Yeah.
So
now it's a good story.
Was there anything in your childhood that led you to engineering, do you think?
I think so. I think one of the things is like I was always like interested in things that my brother was doing. So like he was doing computer science, and like he used to build like machines and so on, and I always found that interesting, right? Like and so I think like just seeing him do things, because like I was home and he was just like doing his work or doing his assignment, whatever he was doing, I just like watch him, and all that always kind of sounded, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. I wish I could do that. That was always in the back of my mind. And then one of the other things I think when I came to high school was actually your class. That kind of like solidified that for me. Like when I started doing that kind of like put the final nail in the coffin, and they're like, this is what you want to do. This is like, I think that's why like I'm really fortunate in that sense, because I had like good role models at different points in my life. I got really lucky. Like my brother was a good role model. You were a good role model. So like it just like I had people at the right time. So it was very clear in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. I want to make things. I want to build things. I have fun doing this. And at the same time, I saw other people in my class. Also, they're brilliant people, but their problem was that they couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. And so that was a big struggle, because it took them a while to get to a point where they could make a decision. And some of them were even undecided after the graduate. And there's nothing wrong in that. It's just I was lucky enough that like I made the decision early enough that I wasn't confused at any point. So, but I don't think most people have that. So that's why I always consider myself very lucky, because I had the right people.
Yeah, I think for some people it takes a while, because they maybe there's a few choices that, like, I know when I was going to university, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I liked science, so I went into sciences. I kind of just went with what I was interested in. And that's sometimes a really good way to go, because hopefully you end up doing something where that you love or are interested in, and you, like they say, you never have to work another day in your life, because you're actually interested in what you do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's it's great coming home not feeling like you're tired of the thing you do. Like you're excited to go back to work. Of course, you have the days where you're tired and like exhausted, but I don't think there's anything better than that feeling, because you're going to spend most of your life doing something, and you have to find somewhere to get money. If the thing that gives you money also gives you happiness, that's that's great. So yeah, but it is definitely a hard question to answer. Like a lot of people have problems with that. Like my niece, she's currently having the same thing. She doesn't really know what she wants to do, and it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to
you have a niece who actually has engineering degree, you were saying, through high
Yeah,
school.
she she's in LA, and they have this program in LA in the high school where, like if you're doing really well in school, and if you can pass like a certain qualification exam, you can actually start your undergrad while you're in high school. So it's this engineering partnership program that they have with a few high schools in the area, and basically you have a group of high school students who want to do the program, and you basically skip your regular high school diploma. They still give you a high school diploma at the end of it, but you just go right into first year university. You're in class with like other people who are probably much older than you, but you are divided into your group of like high school students who are in this program. So they have support networks specifically built for this. So it's actually pretty cool because they have a ton of resources dedicated just to those high school students, just to make sure their transition into the college is easy, because there's certain things that they won't be able to do, but there's certain events they can be a part of. For example, like certain things with alcohol, they won't be able to be a part of. So they have like various other events set up for them, and it's in partnership with the university. So the university is very much aware that they're on campus, and they have like events oriented like for like a more family, like family focused events. So it's great. So that she'll have her degree at the end of this next year. So she's in her 4th year now. She's actually doing an internship at like a U.S. defense company.
Wow.
So yeah, so she's got a jump start, and like it's a great program.
Yeah, there seem to be a lot of really innovative schools in the U.S. At least from what I've seen, and I visited at least a couple that were highly innovative. And in California, they have the charter school program, so even more so, like you could start your own school with a certain idea for how you want to run it, like an innovation school or a project-based school or whatever, right?
I think one of the things that's not true for everyone in the U.S., but like I think California has the luxury of having a lot of industries in various parts that really helps promote these types of programs, and the fact that companies are willing to hire people who, like hire employees who are younger generally, but it's also like one of the things that I think a lot of companies have realized is that like these types of programs get you kind of engineers a lot quicker, because one of the things, at least with engineering programs, tends to be that like you tend to find that a lot of people generally have a like high burnout rate. So there's not enough engineers graduating who can work at the highest level of engineering as quickly. So basically what ends up happening is you'll have people who won't be able to fill that gap for a really long time. So actually you kind of want to hire younger for engineering, because if you hire younger, these people will have a better chance to kind of get to like the highest level of education in engineering, and be able to specialize. Because one of the things is like a lot of engineers tend to not specialize because you don't have to, but certain fields like aeronautics, it's better to specialize in some area of aeronautics. You might want to do something in materials, or you might want to do something with rocket science, but all of these require a relatively high level of education, and a relatively high level of focused education, and that takes a lot of time. So I think one of the reasons for promoting this is also to get more engineers who are qualified at that level. So it helps cultivate, like, keep innovation going, and it helps keep filling the gaps that retired engineers end up creating.
So what do you think is important for students nowadays to be able to be useful in the future, in terms of how they go about their daily lives, or through high school? Like, what are some important things that we should be teaching, and how we should be teaching, and the curriculum, and things like that? What are some things that you would want to focus on?
So I think in general, one of the things that is very important these days is, and this is really something that students will have to eventually get into the mindset of is being able to pick up things and learn by yourself. So I think one of the things generally a lot of teachers try to do throughout high school, like elementary school, college, is kind of give you the ability so you can do learning on your own, right? And I think that particular fact is more important now than ever before because everyone has access to data, right? So everyone has access to the same number of resources that anyone else has. Like if you wanted today, you could at least learn like most of like a physics curriculum from university if you really wanted. And anyone else can do the same thing. There's a ton of open courseware. But I think what enables people, I think what is going to become more and more important as time comes is the ability that people have to adapt to change. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people are discussing is what level of automation will replace certain jobs, right? Like computers are becoming smarter by the day. There's a lot of jobs that can be replaced, which means that as kind of like as students or as people preparing for the future, we're gonna need to live in this world where change is gonna be a more common thing. And generally, people don't do well with change. So that's one of the things that I think we're going into a world where like our reliance on computers is not only going to increase, but our reliance on computers is going to substitute people as well. Which means that if you have a skill, you have to make sure that you keep learning. My dad always told me this. He's like, learning is a lifelong journey, and I don't think that point has been more true than ever before. Because like basically you'll get outdated fast.
Which is why like right now is an interesting social experiment, but as well a test for the education system in terms of being able to learn remotely and pretty much on your own. And I know for teachers, which is a testament to how adaptable a lot of us are, because we had to switch from being in the classroom and what we were used to
right.
being able to teach remotely. And I have to say that at least at our school, we actually did really well. A lot of teachers who wouldn't normally use the tools that they ended up using actually went and learned and figured out how to do it, and successfully for the most part. So,
right.
I mean, mind you, we did lose several students in the process, but because a lot of them still need a little bit of help in several different ways. But and I think having to go through this really showed us, where we need to do some work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think. Yeah, like this is a perfect example of like why change, why adapting to change is a good trait to have, good skill to have. So that's definitely I think one of the most important things I've ever learned. It's actually on that point, I think the most important things I've learned have actually had nothing to do with engineering. Like those things, I think anyone can generally like be able to kind of pick up if they're good at those things. But it's been all these other lessons, and which have been like way more valuable in my life than like like the traditional. There was actually one thing from high school I remember. Actually, our career counselor at that time had said that as it was like supposed to be a way to motivate students, was that if one door closes, another door will open. So just because you've gotten rejected by maybe like, I think at that time it was like schools, so like some people were getting a little bit stressed out, but what if they get rejected to all the schools they apply to? And I remember that because like she had done a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, she told a story of like 3 or 4 students, and then they said, this person couldn't make it this way, and then they went to a different school, tried again, transferred into the college of their choice, and then ended up doing really well in their career. In our engineering program at SFU, we had 2 students who really wanted to do engineering. They kept failing. They failed 3 times, went on academic probation, retried again, got out of probation, got back into engineering, did the whole 4-year program, and those the two of my friends, and now they're working at Microsoft and one's at Intel. So they went from constantly failing to like succeeding in ways that people didn't imagine. And I think that's also like perseverance is definitely also another important trait. Don't be afraid of failure. I guess that's like everyone says this is like a broken record, but like really that is true. Like you have to fail before you can succeed.
Right. And make that part of your learning.
Yeah. And one other thing, it's better to fail when you're young. Like it's much harder to deal with failure if you have never dealt with it throughout the entire life. So for like students who listen to this, like that's like it's fine, like I mean, I'm not saying go and like say like drop a class or something like that, but failure is a lesson. Like it means you can do better if you find ways to do better. When I was in high school, of course I didn't think that. I was like, oh man, I failed. That sucks. And our first instinct is always to like blame ourselves for something. It's like, yeah, we might not have done something, but like I never asked myself the question when I failed, how can I do better? It took me a while to learn, like, okay, I need to actually do something more on my end to do better.
Well, I've read a few books about design thinking and stuff like that, and they like to use the term fail forward. And I love that term because you're failing in order to move forward, right? And you better take something out of it. Otherwise, it really is a waste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So, in terms of your job, I mean, it takes a lot of your time, right? Yeah. But you also have some side projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I have, at any point in time, I'll have sometimes too many side projects, but I don't always get a time to finish all of them. So I have like a bunch of open projects.
What are some of your side projects?
I was in the autonomous air vehicle competition 5 or 6 years ago now, where we built like a quadcopter, and then we had it like kind of go through this like course using GPS and kind of come back, land, and then do the whole round.
Not remote controlled, but autonomous.
Not remote controlled, autonomously. Yeah. So me and like a group of my friends from school, we built this thing. We went out, we competed. We did pretty well. I think we're second in this competition. We won a few, but I mean, like, it was really not about winning. It was just about like having fun. But like, it was good to win. It was great when you won. But so that was one project. So I've kind of revisited that. So I'm kind of working on this like flying saucer project now. So recently, I think I mentioned I got a 3D printer, and one of the things that I've been working on is trying to figure out how I can make this kind of contraption fly with just one single fan source, and using various airflow channels to basically mimic a quadcopter, but with one motor, kind of right in the center. So that's one. I mean, I have tons of projects at home that I had to take down some of them, unfortunately, but I had like a laser board where you could kind of like paint on it with like, one of those pen lasers. So you could like, it was like a panel the size of like, basically you could like whiteboard on like this like LED panel with like a laser.
I remember you visited our school with like a Wiimote, and you were trying to work.
Oh, that's like a
Do you remember
long
that?
time back.
Yeah, that's a long time back. You were trying to show, or did you come to school? I can't remember, but you were talking about a Wiimote, using a Wiimote as like to draw on virtual
draw on any
whiteboard
surface.
or something.
Yeah, creating like a virtual whiteboard and then using like the Wiimote's IR sensor to like make any surface a whiteboard. So that was a long time ago. But yeah, so honestly, I've done like there's always so many things going on, but I think like those home projects really, like, I think keep me grounded, because it keeps my love for the field. Like I like building things, and I feel like if I ever stopped building things, I would kind of go. I feel like I wouldn't know what to do with my time.
Just wait till you have kids.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I mean, when that happens, I'm sure these projects will slow down significantly.
Actually, I have to say, like with kids, like when they get to a certain age, like
Yeah.
Mr. Solly knows, when you get to a certain age, then you can actually you start doing stuff with them. So like with Miles, he's 13 now. We've worked on a few 3D printing projects. He designed using Onshape, which is an online CAD program. He built a soap box because he kept complaining that the soap in the shower kept disappearing because the water was hitting the soap and dissolving it. So I was like, well, how do we solve that problem? He's like, well, we need a soap box. I'm like, okay. So can you design one? So he went in and he actually made this thing. I don't have it here, but it actually works quite well. It's got a lid and it's got holes at the bottom, and it's got like 4 legs, so that would be stand up away from the level of water in the shower. So, I mean, those kinds of things become a lot of fun. You become a collaborator with your child. So
yeah.
But maybe it opens the world for like even crazier ideas then, I guess.
Because kids have crazy ideas. They do.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And we were talking about a diversity of ideas. Maybe you should bring some children into Apple.
I mean,
seriously.
one thing I will tell you is that's a good point. Kids think without boundaries. We've been told to limit ourselves to certain boundaries because we feel like we understand the world in the way that we like perceive it, but so we never really challenge the edge of those limits. Whereas like when a kid or like someone comes and asks you in general, right? Like I've some of the best questions or some of the best ideas I've gotten to do things have come from people who actually were not engineers. One of the biggest problems of having people who are engineers is that they limit yourself within this box. Like, okay, based on the physics, this is where things fit in. And you don't kind of think about what you can do outside of that. So when an idea comes that's like, okay, that probably won't work, you just reject it. When it comes from someone who doesn't quite have the same bounds as you, they'll just tell you, hey, couldn't you make something like this? And you're like, I don't think it would work. And then they kind of argue, it's like, why not? That's the thing. When someone asks you why not, you generally don't ask yourself why not constantly enough when a new idea comes. And I think that's what like kids have. They don't have those boundaries. They don't have those expectations set of this is what an idea is or isn't. Right. They think, why can't you make it?
And they're less likely to filter themselves out, right? They're
exactly.
more likely to just speak their mind.
Yeah, I mean, kids say the darndest thing. There was a show on exactly that.
Yeah.
So,
how do you like at Apple? There's engineers and there's designers, and probably 2 different styles of doing things or mindsets. And it's always been a mystery to me how those 2 groups come together and get along and actually work on stuff, because I guess when you're a designer, aesthetics come into play, and how usable something is comes into play. When you're an engineer, it's more technical and how you're going to make it work, right? So how does that work at Apple?
So I think the best way to describe how kind of most interactions in general tend to work. I think this is I feel like it's more general in the industry than just an Apple thing, because there's the same thing at Blackberry. And honestly, same thing with just the projects that I work on. I usually have an idea, and then the engineering is a means of getting to that conclusion of realizing that idea. So even if that idea seems kind of crazy and out there, you'll do the engineering work to get to a point where like you'll push it to the edge till you feel like it can't be done in this way, and we have to modify a few things here and there, and then you have that feedback loop saying, okay, well, what are the compromises you can make? What are the things that you can? And I think this is like that's why I'm saying it's more general, because it's not always just like a design to engineering thing. It's just, I think it's like, if you want to make something, what are the compromises you're willing to make in that design? Whether that be for personal projects, work projects, whatever it happens to be. There's always like, you have to kind of judge the situation, do the hard work of figuring out what the solution needs to be, and then finding the compromises that work. So that's really the so it kind of gels very well with like how things generally go. It's like a very natural design process.
So once you figure out is this how it works? Like once you figure out the engineering and then how to make it possible, then the designers come into play, or is it a bit of both at the same time, and you have a supervisor that coordinates it somehow?
So I think,
I mean, like Apple products are beautiful and they work well, and they're very usable, and they pride themselves on things like just working. And also from an engineering standpoint, it's amazing how they fit all those things into a device and actually make it work well. So there's a couple different things going on, right?
Yeah. So anytime you design something and you make something new, if you let engineering dictate design, then the problem ends up being that like you will kind of do the things. And so here's a good way to explain it. Engineers are lazy. If we don't have to do it, we won't do it.
Right.
So the thing is, it has to be like, okay, this is it. This is the design. Make it work, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's make this work.
Ryan, you're frozen in the worst way. You were frozen like this. Yeah, you've unfrozen now. This is the reality.
Okay, good. Can you deal with it? I didn't see what was my face?
Like this.
Oh.
It's just beautiful. This is going to go out to millions of people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what were you saying, Edwin?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's always more about like, design's always first.
Mm-hmm.
That's what has to be, what dictates like, what the limitations are.
Right.
So it's always design first, and this is true for basically everywhere that I've worked. Blackberry was the same way. Design came first, and you have to kind of work with that. Like you have to fit your things into that model.
Right, because I guess design is closer to what humans interact with, right. And then engineering is more like, how do you get it that way?
Right. So that's what I was kind of trying to allude to earlier. It's like a very natural process, right? Because like if you were to make something, you'd first have an idea, and then you'd figure out, well, how do I actually make that work? Like being said with the miles, it's like, okay, we have a problem, the soapbox. Like we need a soapbox. So you have this thing of, well, we need one. And then how you're going to do it is the engineering work. So we're all engineers to some extent in our lives, because we find solutions to problems. So it's that's really what engineering really is. So you're solving a problem. Sometimes you're solving a problem that doesn't exist, but
and sometimes that works. Like
yeah.
Who knew we needed iPhones, and now it's the most popular device that Apple sells, right? Like I remember, I think people keep going back to that interview with Steve Ballmer from Microsoft. He was the Microsoft CEO at that time, and in the interview, he was asked, "What do you think about the Apple iPhone?" And he was like, "It's so expensive, and are you kidding? It's not. Nobody's going to want this." And it's in hindsight, that looks really dumb, but I guess at the time you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, obviously somebody knew. This guy knew. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's people with problems that drive the solutions, and sometimes it seems like companies just come up with stuff that are appealing, and somehow that creates a market.
Yeah, I mean, like I think everyone has some interesting ideas, some crazy ideas, and so like I think for a lot of people it's like, hey, um, I mean, you're seeing so many like smart products these days, like smart mugs, smart refrigerators, it's kind of going to the point of being overboard, right? But so but like, that was likely someone's crazy idea. It's like, hey, people, I want this. People would totally want it, right? If I want it.
Yeah, 3D televisions, remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting to see like how the tech landscape's facing, like, but that's the other thing, right? It's like I might not use something, but someone else might, like
Mm-hmm.
like not everyone not everyone wants a smartphone still, right? I think
Right.
these days that's kind of changing, but I think there are people who still like the old school feature phones because they just need to make a phone call. That's it. Um, I actually, it's very interesting that those things existed at one point.
Yeah.
And they were like the mainstream thing, I remember having I remember the Nokias. Oh, those things were great, built like a brick
Yeah.
with the nice like 2D display. You'd have like Snake, that was like the
Oh yeah.
top end of graphics
That's a great game.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first cell phone was a Motorola StarTAC, and that was I think Motorola's first flip phone. But it was so cool
Wow.
because it was like Star Trek, right? I guess that's the designers thought about Star Trek when they designed it, but it was a really tiny phone, but it had a stupid antenna that kept getting bent. So you had to pull out the antenna to properly use it, and then you flick it open, and then you flick it closed, and it was the coolest thing. And when I started substitute teaching, my parents bought that for me so that I could get calls on the go. Yeah, that was my first phone. What was your first phone, Ryan?
I couldn't even tell you. I don't remember. I didn't have a phone for a long time. Because I'm trying to think. I probably didn't get a phone until like 2005-ish was probably like my first phone, maybe 2003, 2005, somewhere in there. I remember having like a little, probably Motorola flip phone that I got, I think at like Future Shop, like a prepaid kind of one. I remember having that. And then I remember having a Nokia one that actually had a little, like we were talking about the keyboard, that flipped out of the bottom. So you kind of pushed it down and a little keyboard popped out of the bottom. That would have probably been like, I don't know, 2007, 2008. And then I think I maybe had only two or three phones before I got my first iPhone. I can't remember when that have been, but yeah. So it was never a huge thing for me. Yeah.
Things have changed. I remember rotary phones growing up in our house. And those were, even back then, I never picked one up and thought, this is cool technology. I was like, this is ridiculous. The fact that you have to dial a number, wait for the thing to click, 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 click all the way back. And then you dial it wrong. And you're like, and then you have to hang up and you have to start all over again. And then the stupid cords would always get tangled. And with like a little bit of my OCD, I was like, I have to, and I was constantly taking them apart and then straightening them out and stuff like that. It was a constant irritation, so, certain things, I know that was the technology at the time, but from the get-go, I thought, this is foolish. Why do we have these? Right. And then they came up with touchtone.
Oh.
You can actually press the numbers. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
The world really not what it used to be.
A lot of changes, right?
Yeah.
The 90s was the internet. I remember being asked, are you going to get an email address when you go to UBC? I was like, what's an email? I didn't know what that was. So I remember, in my lifetime, a ton of changes happening, and very quickly too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's actually kind of scary to see how far we've come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because like I think even when I was going to school, I never had a cell phone. I had an address book where I would write the numbers. Like at the end of my planner, I would put numbers for my
Mm-hmm.
friends so I could call them. And then I'd realized I'd called my friends enough times that I'd memorized their numbers. These
Mm-hmm.
days, it's not even a thing. You put the numbers down. So like my mom used to always ask me, it's like leave the planner at home so I know who to call when you're away. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
It's like okay, who are you hanging out with? Okay, I'm gonna go out with like Brian or someone, and they're like, okay, we'll call them to make sure that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just like, okay, where are you? Just share your address, like your location.
Share your GPS coordinates. So
Exactly.
different. Well, Edwin, there was a time when I would just go out and be like, see you at dinner time. And my parents would be okay. And that'd be it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that is mostly it for me. My parents were just like, they like to micromanage a little bit more. So they're like, give us the contact. I was like, I'm not going to be at the house, I might be walking around somewhere.
But it's also, there's a lot more fear nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Maybe part of that has to do with the media, but maybe part of that is real fear. But who knows? It's just not something we do nowadays. Like when Miles goes out for a bike ride, I'm like, take your cell phone just in case I need to contact you. I still let him go out because he's 13,
right.
But there's a little bit more worry nowadays, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, the one great thing that comes out of like smartphone and tech is that we get like, everyone is a reporter. Like we like things that happen out there. Like someone can just record it and then post it on YouTube and so on, and like the whole world we get to hear that story.
Right, everybody's their own reporter, and they can report anything. Yeah.
So it's like more eyes, which is a good thing, I guess, to some extent. Of course, there's always there's always privacy concerns to that side. So, but with all the things that have been going around, I think it's only a good thing at the moment.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance.
Yeah,
that we'll have to navigate for the next few years, in the next decade. Yeah.
Well, I was kind of wondering about that, Edwin, with your work. Like, are you finding like, has COVID affected like what you're doing, and do you see any sort of long-term changes because of that?
I think for the most part, like for us, it's been mostly work, as usual. Like I think various things have been done to like help accommodate this whole stay-at-home atmosphere. So like I think we've handled it relatively okay. With regards to what may or may not change, I think like as the situation progresses, we'll see what happens. But I think for now, it's like I think indefinitely, at least my work hasn't really been affected. Like I've been able to work at home just as effectively, if not sometimes more effectively than at work. But I understand that not everyone has the same kind of luxury that they can be as productive at home. So,
well, I've heard somebody say that instead of working from home, it should be called living at work, which is really, while we were, teaching from home, that's what it felt like a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
My kids would constantly come in here, and we'd be doing stuff, or I'd have to go take care of a chore and that kind of thing.
I think to add to Ryan's question was, I think one of the things is that I found very difficult personally to deal with was finding that separation between work and now I'm going to stop and I'm going to be home. It's very easy to get into that, and this is probably a very common theme. It's very easy to let that work time slip over into your personal time because you're like, okay, wait, 1 more hour. I'll spend 1 more hour. And then if you don't give yourself a break, you'll realize 1 more hour became 2 hours, 3 hours, and all of a sudden, like, you didn't have any time to yourself. So I think initially that was the hardest part for me, like being able to, split that time and be like, okay, no, I'm done with work now. I've done my hours for the day. So that's I don't always succeed still. Like, I think there are days where it spills over, but I think that's really the thing that's been the hardest, like, for me to deal with this whole work at home situation. But definitely finding a routine and sticking to it helps. If you break that routine, all of a sudden a whole bunch of things will seem to go wrong that day.
Yeah, I think mentally for all of us, it was having a routine that really helped us get through it. Like, I know for my kids, they had a routine right away, thankfully, through their schools. And so they didn't, just let everything slide. And that helped with all of us, because it was like, okay, these hours we're going to be working. This hour we're going to use for lunch. It kind of helps you get through stuff like this, because otherwise your mind is just lost in a jumble.
Right.
And then, like, right after school, let's go for a bike ride. Like, every day we'd go for a bike ride somewhere. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's how you get through these times.
Yeah. So I just want to end off here by you revealing some Apple secrets and things that you're working on.
Well,
Remember, he's looking at you. He's smiling, but he's staring at you.
I'll give you this much. You've stuck to your guns with that question.
So you said, are you working on the watch right now? Is that what you're working on? Can you say that?
I can't say anything related to work, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. So you're still working there. We know that much.
Yeah, you're completely entitled to know.
Maybe after this you won't be anymore.
Yeah, who knows?
So you have some interesting projects going on.
Personally, yes. Work-wise, who knows? I don't.
Wow, that top secret.
I'm a stonewall,
Well,
at least when it comes to work.
Seems like they've trained you well.
With you sometime.
I'm sure. Board games is another good thing to do at this time. If you have people who can play, that's what I've been doing. Good pastime. But yeah, poker.
All right, we've taken up a lot of your time, and I guess you need to go back to working on that autonomous car. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Or holographic device for your glasses.
You're persistent. I'll give you that much. I feel like some of the things I said earlier, you're kind of sticking to it. You
just blink twice if you agree. All right, Edwin, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Everybody.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Really, really nice to meet you, Edwin.
Yeah, nice to chat with you guys.
Have a good time in Michigan until this is over and you return to your UFO home base.
Yes, I can't wait.
All right, take care. Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.